served 6 years at the North Carolina House of Representatives. He's married to sweet Paulette Beatty. Let's extend Jim a warm Rotary welcome.
Thank you very much, Rex, and thank all of you for your warm reception. I think I know about half of the membership here, so and most of them came up to speak, and I appreciate that. And also, I'm happy to be on the occasion that Tony is president of the Charlotte Rotary Club, because he and I go back to when he first got here to Charlotte. So it's nice to see you again. And we, of course, work together at CPCC, mainly in conjunction with the old Charlotte Central High School and the scholarship fund over at CPCC. So I'm happy to be here. So many familiar faces. And of course, Rex, I just told Rex that I'm going to let him travel with me as I go to different speaking engagements around the country and around the state. Nobody does a better job introducing me than Rex. So Rex, thank you once again. I want to recognize a very close friend of mine whom you all may not be familiar with, Reggie McAfee, who's a guest of Harry Jones today. Reggie went to Chapel Hill, and he has the distinction of being the first African American to ever break the 4-minute mile. So let's give Reggie a nice round. And Ed, you wanted me to recognize a young lady that's running, and the name slips me. Would you stand up and let the crowd know about the girl you mentioned who's running in high school?
Okay. Well, Frances Massey, who's at East Lake High School, interestingly enough, she is a quadruple. Last spring, she won as a freshman 3,200, 1,600 meters in a conference. So remember the name of Frances Massey.
Right. Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is, I know a lot of people, you never would realize that maybe something humorous could happen during an individual athletic competition, particularly like track and field. But one thing happened to me, and this goes back to when I ran the indoor 4-minute mile. And as you recall, at that time on Sundays at 4:30, ABC Wide World of Sports would come on, and most Americans were in front of their TV on Sunday afternoon. So I'm sitting in my apartment in Los Angeles, waiting for the race, and Jim Beatty, of course, is the announcer, and he makes a comment about me saying, and Jim Beatty, who ran a great race for us against the Soviets last year in Moscow. And when I heard Jim Beatty say that, I kind of paused, and I said, I didn't run a great race. That was the luckiest race I ever ran in my life in Moscow. So I want to set the stage for you so you'll understand the magnitude of this. Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of the Soviet Union, was sitting side by side with Averell Harriman, the ambassador from the United States to the Soviet Union under President Kennedy. I was in the 1,500 meters, and my teammate on the LA Track Club was also in the 1,500 meters representing our country. The Soviets really didn't have any good runners, so we were favored 1 and 2. So we take off on the race, and my teammate is a runner that never liked to lead. He just liked to follow and depend upon his kid. So I knew from the beginning I would have to lead the whole way. So we went around the first quarter, went around the second quarter, coming down to the third, and the gun fires for our gun lap, so to speak. And I'm going around the first turn, and my teammates on my shoulder start going up the far straightaway, and then suddenly I realize that I don't know whether we have a lap to go or this is the gun lap. For some reason, I don't know where my mind was, but I missed the gun. So I'm running up the far straightaway, trying to decide what to do. And my mind says, well, if I get to the top of the turn, and then I start kicking, and I go down, and I win, and they fire the gun, I'll have one more lap to go, and I'll be too exhausted, really, to run another lap. On the other hand, if I don't make a move, and it is the last lap, and I let my teammate jump me, it's possible he could win the race. So I'm going up to the straightaway, we go into the turn, now we're at the top of the turn, coming down to the straightaway toward the finish line. And finally, out of frustration, I say, I don't have any choice. I've got to ask my teammate, where are we? So I turn around to my shoulder and I say, Jim, where are we? And of course, he doesn't know what I'm talking about. And he says, what? And I said, is this the last lap? And he says, yes. And I say, thank you. So when Jim McKay makes a comment about the great race, I always say to myself, that's the luckiest race I ever ran. Say the least. And Rex was correct about my growing up in Dilworth and going to Central High School. And matter of fact, when Rex called me, I think it was in October, to be a guest speaker here, and he gave me a couple of dates, and then he said March 17. And I said, well, Rex, that's St. Patrick's Day, and I'm part Irish. I had a grandmother from Dublin, Ireland. My middle name's Tully. So I said, put me down for St. Patrick's Day. And so that's the reason I'm here today and not on some other occasion. Now, let me get back to Charlotte Central. And boxing was real big at Central High School. And in midwinter, what would go on in gym, the boys would put on boxing gloves and the coach would carry you off and you'd be fighting another kid. But they also had a huge tournament at Central High School, Intermule, that was so popular. It was standing room only every night on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So what happened to me, which is symbolic about two things that occurred in my life that brings me here, there was a tap on my shoulder. And I turned around, it was the coach, and he said, Beatty, you're boxing in the tournament. I said, Coach, Beatty's not boxing in the tournament. You're boxing in the tournament. Well, as you know, in that particular era, when the coach said something, you ended up doing it. I was carrying my paper out down Romney Road, the Charlotte Observer, and one thing I knew about boxing was it took stamina. So I started running my paper out to get in shape. So it turns out my sophomore year that I win my weight championship. Now we fast forward to my junior year. Pardon me, same time, time for the boxing tournament. I'm still carrying my paper out, and I have to defend my championship, so I start running my paper out again to get in shape for the boxing tournament. It happens to be that one night, three-minute rounds, at one night I'm boxing, and I am so fresh at the end of it that for some reason the thought came into my mind that maybe I can run the mile. I never had been to a track meet, I never ran around the track. But that thought entered my mind, and fortunately for me, sitting beside me in one of my classes, a senior boy who was our #1 miler, I said something to him, and he said, well, you need to come out for the track team because we always need more milers. So I said, well, Archie, I'm going to come out. Well, this was like in early February. Of course, I didn't go out, and time went on, and time went on. Finally, we get into Holy Week, and we're off on Holy Thursday and Good Friday, so the last day in school is on Wednesday. And Archie, my friend, turns around to me and he says, Jimmy, if you're coming out for the track team, you better hurry up because our last home meet is Friday, and after that they're all away and coach will never put you on the travel team. So that was enough to spur me on. So the next day, Holy Thursday, I went uptown to, y'all remember Fallen Crimes Sporting Goods store. I went up to Fallen Crimes and I bought a pair of track shoes. I went down to the track, it's actually the secret mile. I went down to the track to see if I could run 4 laps, which I did. I made the mile, went back the next day, and I walked up to the coach and I said, Coach, you don't know me. I'm Jimmy Beatty, I'm a junior here at Central. I came down yesterday, I ran 4 laps, I made it. I'd like to run the mile today. And he said, son, can't let you run. You're a young teenage boy. To run a competitive mile, you could hurt yourself, and I can't do that. But I kept tugging at him, and finally, I think just out of frustration, he said, okay, I'm going to let you run, but you get in the back and don't get in anybody's way. Which, of course, I did, getting in, running around. Finally, we're on the last lap, I'm running third. We took the far straightaway, I'm running third. Our second guy's not far ahead. I say, I think I can get him. So I start kicking, come off the turn, and I pass in. Now we're coming down the straightaway, and my seatmate friend, not that far ahead, and I say, I think I can get Archie. Well, I start kicking, I pass Archie, and I win the race, and I break Central School track record. I was more surprised than the coach. So anyway, the next week we have a huge meet in Durham, the new Durham Relays, which is a big Southern interscholastic meet. Prep schools in Virginia, schools in North Carolina, South Carolina, a couple from Atlanta, Druid Hills, you all may be familiar with that school, the prep schools over in Tennessee. So Coach puts me in the mile run, and the defending champion is a boy from High Point who's a senior. I run in the race, but on the last lap on the far straightaway, I'm in a pack and way behind, but I start kicking, coming around the turn, come down the straightaway. I don't beat him, I almost catch him. He beats me by a body length. We both break the Duke Durham Relays record. So I come in second at the Duke Durham Relays. The next week, we go to High Point for the conference championship, our school conference. Central High Point, R.J. Reynolds, those schools. So anyway, I say to myself, don't get so far behind, stay close to him. So I do that, and we come to the last lap, and I make a move on him, and I win, and so suddenly I'm now the conference champion. The next week's the state championship in in Chapel Hill. So I'm back up there, and of course, the defending champion from High Point, so it's going to be me against him once again. So he takes off, and he leads, and I'm way on the far side and running in a pack, and finally I say, I need to start moving because he's going to win this race. So I start kicking, and I finally catch him about 5 yards from the finish line, and I win the race, and I become the state champion. So what happens in the space of a month of never having seen a track meet or run a mile, suddenly I'm the state champion. And yeah, I'm as surprised as anybody, I can tell you, that's for sure. The next year, of course, came, and I had no competition really, and won the state championship without any problem. Had scholarship offers. I was still carrying my observer paper out, for the boxing and everything else. So one offer came in from Notre Dame, and I, being Catholic and being part Irish, and open having pulled for the Golden Dome, I said, well, I'm going to go to Notre Dame. Well, they gave me a full ride. I signed the grenade, and I was headed up to Notre Dame. But that summer, almost every day, it seemed like Coach Ranson from Chapel Hill was in Charlotte. I thought he lived here, he said so much. He kept saying to me, he'd say, Jimmy, if you're going to live in the state, you want to go to the state university. That finally set in, and I changed my mind 2 weeks before school started, contacted Notre Dame, and told them I was going to UNC, and therefore I started at Chapel Hill. Had a great career. I have to say that Coach Ranson was true to his word. When I went to Chapel Hill, Coach Ranson said, pardon me, he said, Jimmy, when you are ready, I can tell you we will send you to the big meets. And they did that right away. My sophomore year, they sent me to East Lansing, Michigan for the National Cross Country Championship. I came in 13th as the highest ranking sophomore that year. I wasn't able to run my junior year. I was hurt, so I missed that meet my junior year. My senior year, I knew that my time had come and I was going to win the National Cross Country Championship. However, what I didn't anticipate was a blizzard in East Lansing. It was 24 degrees. It was 5 degrees below on a wind chill factor, and the snow was swirling everywhere, and I looked like I was at the Florida Relays. I had, those little skimpy shirts, sleeveless, little shorts, and I had Adidas running shoes, and that was it. And I looked around me, I have a photo of it, and all these guys from the Midwest and the East, they had on these long sleeve shirts, they had hats on, they had gloves on, leotards on, they were dressed for the weather. And I looked like a fool there, like the Florida Relays. I did not win. I came in second, but in my own mind, I like to, even to this day, I like to say, well, I would have won if it just been good weather. I had a good career at Chapel Hill, and they sent me, I ran all the indoor meets in Boston, Madison Square Garden, Chicago, Cleveland, the big indoor circuit. They sent me to all the national outdoor meets out in California. I had 3 national runner-ups. I should have had 3 national championships, but I didn't. But that kind of drained me. But time went. I I was among the favorites to make the Olympic team to go to Melbourne, Australia, but had an awful day in the down cycle. Didn't make the Olympic team, great disappointment. Of course, came back to Chapel Hill for my senior year, had the usual thing, traveling, the indoor meets, the outdoor meets, and then graduated. And then, like most guys at that time, went in the Army. I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Any of you who went there, remember Tank Hill? That's where I was located. Yeah, Tank Hill. So anyway, I was in the Army, and at that time down south, there was no avenue for an amateur athlete to continue in sport, as opposed to like New York, the New York Athletic Club, Philadelphia Pioneer Club, Chicago Track Club, the LA Olympic Club. But down here, nothing existed, so there was no avenue. Plus society said it was time to get on with it. So anyway, I got out of the Army, went to work, and then the second big thing that occurred was this telephone call I got out of the blue. Our good friend, the late Jack Wood. Jack Wood was loved track. He himself had been a weight man in track and field. And Jack calls me up, and he said, Jimmy, let's go to Philadelphia and watch our boys against the Soviets. It was the second U.S. versus Soviet meet. The first had been in Moscow. This was in Philadelphia at Franklin Field. And I hadn't, I didn't enter my mind. I said, Jack, that's a great idea. Let's go up there. I knew about more than half the team, but they were good friends of mine. And I said, well, this will give me a chance to renew friendships and have a nice visit with people in track and field. So Jack and I are at Franklin Field in Philadelphia. It's now pushing almost 2.5 years since I had last run. So we're sitting in there watching a 1,500 meter run, and the Americans win 1 and 2. And Jack Wood very nonchalantly turns around to me and says, Jimmy, you could have won that race today. I didn't answer right away. But then shortly thereafter, I turned around and I said, Jack, I think you're right. That had me start thinking about the Rome Olympic Games that were coming up. And like I said, being Catholic, like Notre Dame, I said, I would love to go to Rome. So I came back to Charlotte, and I started debating in my mind, well, should I do it, should I not do it? Finally, July goes by, August goes by, September comes up, and I say, I'm going to go up to Chapel Hill and talk to Coach Ransom. So I go up and talk to Coach, tell him I'd like to try for the Olympic team again. And I asked him, I said, Coach, do you think I can, get the passion back? And Coach Ransom says, Jimmy, I told you you could always break a world record, and I still think you can. But if you start running again, I urge you to move to California and run under this Hungarian coach. So I came back to Charlotte. Now we're into October. Now we'll get into late October. And I keep debating in my mind, it's a big decision. So finally, at the very end of October, I make up my mind, I say, well, I'm going to give it one more shot. So I pack my bag and I move out to California. I have one last stop, and that's in Reno. I go to Harris Club in Reno. And it wasn't a gamble, it wasn't a drink, except maybe a brew, but I heard the 4 Aces were playing there. And I wanted to hear Love Was a Many Splendid Thing. So I stopped in Reno, go to Harris, hear the 4 Aces, drive on out to California, get to the track where a club was trained at about 5:30 in the evening. This is about November 1. The Olympic trials are, the Olympic trials are 8 months away, and I haven't run in 2.5 years. So I go up to the coach and I say, Coach, you may not remember me. I'm Jimmy Beatty from the University of North Carolina. And while I'm saying that, he does recognize me, and he said, well, who was this fat man? Only because I wasn't in running weight. It was good for a citizen, but not for a runner. So anyway, I said, Coach, I've come out here to ask you to train me for the United States Olympic team to go to Rome. So he agrees, and so the next day I go and I buy another pair of track shoes, and I start training again. Now what happens, in January, the first indoor meet ever on the West Coast takes place in at the LA Sports Arena, and they call our club and say, we're trying to fill up the 2-mile run. You got anybody? And they say, well, we got Jimmy Beatty up here. He used to run the indoor meets in the back east. And they said, well, send him down. So I go down to LA to run a 2-mile run, and I surprise everybody because I win the race. Now, 3 weeks later, on February 13th, there's a meet at the Garden by the New York Athletic Club. They call our club again, and the same kind of conversation. We're trying to fill up the mile run, and you got anybody that you can send up here? And they, same thing, well, we got Jimmy Beatty. Remember, he was at Chapel Hill, UNC, used to run up there. They said, yeah, we remember Jimmy, send him up. So now I'm headed back east to the Garden, my hometown. So I'm in the mile run, and who's in the mile run but the guy I had seen in Philadelphia at the U.S. versus Soviet meet, who was America's #1 miler, who had won that 1,500-meter run. And he had just won a meet out in L.A., and he was ranked #1 in the United States. And here I am, you know, what's it now, barely out of retirement, coming training again, back in the Garden, but running against America's #1 miler. Turns out we're on the last lap. He makes his move. The crowd, 16,000, the old Garden, 16,000 people, and they're going wild. He doesn't know on his shoulder because the crowd's so loud, and he thinks he hasn't won. We come off the turn, very short straightaway. I pull side by side from him. We both lunge for the tape. There's a photo finish, but I win the race. And so now, with almost not that much time having expired, since I moved to California, I suddenly knock off America's #1 miler, and I'm on my way. We go to the spring. This same guy, in April, late April, early May, breaks the American mile record. He runs 3:58.6 for 1 mile and breaks the American mile record. And we're having a meet in Modesto, California, in the San Joaquin Valley, and I'm invited to run the mile run. Well, he's in the race, among with other guys who are all national milers. My fastest time going into this race is 4:05.4. But my coach already has a strategy laid out, and that is to run a fast pace and try to kill off this guy's kick, because he did have a good kick. So we set the pace, and I lead most of the way. And I remember getting to the gun lap, and I hear the guy say 3 flat, 3 minutes. And my mind says, God, all I got to do is break 60, and I'm a 4-minute miler. Well, not only do I break 60, but I run 58 flat, and I break the American record, and also become, you know, the 3rd American to go on to sub-4 outdoor. So now, suddenly, I'm the American record at 1 mile, and I'm a sub-4-minute miler. The next week, there's a big meet in Compton, California, outside of LA, and I'm in it in the 5,000 meters, and it turns out I win, and I knock the American record up about 14 seconds, and suddenly I'm catapulted into, you know, the world-class distance runners. Go to Rome. I win the American Olympic trials, go to Rome as a dark horse favorite. I get injured in Bern, Switzerland in an exhibition meet, tear the ligaments in my foot. I win the race, but my foot's wrapped up. I knew I wasn't going to make the finals in Rome. I ran the heats, but this is what happened, which leads to the 4-minute mile. I'm sitting in the stands at the Olympic Stadium in Rome, disappointed, and I'm watching these guys win and get medals. And I started thinking about when I left the Catholic school to go to Central, one of the nuns in a yearbook wrote, in my yearbook said, may the clouds of adversity never darken the horizon of your life. So I thought about that. And suddenly, my disappointment started moving in a different direction, more toward like anger. And I made a vow that I would come back the next year and I would show them what an American could do. And that became my mission. And the next year, I beat everybody in the world the next year. And I was named the #1 miler in the world that year And I was the first American in 27 years to be ranked #1 in the world. And since then, only one other, you may remember the great Jim Ryan in the late 60s, Jim Ryan. So in the last 80 years, believe it or not, only 3 Americans have been ranked #1 in the world in 1 mile run. So all of that brought me finally to start thinking about indoors. And when I was thinking about indoors and turned the light on, I said, it's time for somebody to break the indoor 4-minute mile, and I want to be the guy. I go to my coach, I tell him what's on my mind. I said, do we have enough time for me to get in shape for the indoor season to do that? Pardon me. He closes his eyes. He's trying to go through my training schedule. He opens his eyes. He says, we have time. He closes his eyes again, and he said, we will run a race on February 10 at the LA Times Indoor Games. That was the goal. Now, in late November, we got a call from Rune Arledge at ABC Wide World of Sports, and they want to know, what is Jim Beatty's indoor schedule? So the president of our club said, well, he's going to try to be the first man in the world to run an indoor mile under 4 minutes. And of course, ABC Wide World simply says, we'll be there. So thank you all for being here. Now we're going to be there on February 10 at the LA Sports Arena.